Let's take a look at Rule of 4 scenarios. This is Lesson 7 of Unit 4, Part 2. When will you teach this lesson? Let's take a look at the big picture to find out. As you can see here, this is only Math 7 for Math 7 Accelerated. This is during the second 9 weeks. Once again, Unit 4, Part 2 for linear functions. And if you notice down here towards the bottom, this lesson will be taught during week 7 and week 8, and it is a 2-day lesson. So what standards does this lesson address? Where can you find helpful teacher tips? And what about presentation strategies? We'll take a look at the scope and sequence. So first of all, looking at the standards, this lesson addresses standard 23 of the Math 7 Accelerated Course of Study. Notice here there's a focus on both the rate of change and initial value of a linear function. So for my helpful teacher tips for this, it once again mentions the rate of change as well as the initial values, and also this rule of 4. And the rule of 4 consists of a verbal description, a table, a graph, and an equation. So they're tying all those different parts together. Here are your prerequisites and the items that you'll need for this lesson. So for your presentation strategies, this is a 2-day lesson, so we're going to look at both days 1 and day 2. For day 1, you want to give them a copy of the worksheet, have them read the problem individually, and then give them a minute to discuss what they think the independent and dependent variables are, and what they should use, what the sentence should say. So this is just going to be their way of summing up the problem. Next, give the students a chance to fill in the initial value and rate of change, and equation as a small group. So this is going to be a great opportunity for them to discuss. So if you have any students that are still struggling with this content, then they can have that discussion within their group. Next, we want to use the equation and have the students fill in the table and remind them that in the process column to show their work. This is critical because we don't want them to skip that step. We want them to see that pattern and that it repeats all the way through. And then have a random student present their table and their graph for the class so that you can have a discussion. And there's all kind of questions that you can ask. Which one do they find easier? Could they take a look at an equation and create a verbal description? So could they do this process backwards? Can they look at a graph or a table and make sense of the scenario? And then next, in groups 3 to 4, students will each be given a scenario, and this will lead them into day 2. So they're going to start their work for day 2 at the end of day 1. Now, on day 2, they're going to finish working on their individual scenarios and create their posters. Let's take a look at the lesson. So here's the page for putt-putt golf and all that information. And then here's their working template for their individual scenarios for their groups. And then there are 3 pages of scenarios that you can assign to each group in your class. So for the putt-putt golf, we're going to take a look at each individual part, because once you see this, then the other scenarios just duplicate this process. So first, you have the story, and the story is given. Next, you want the students to take that story and sum it up in their own words. Next, they can identify the independent and dependent variable. They can decide what the initial value and the rate of change is for this scenario. And based on the initial value and the rate of change, they should be able to write this equation. So then we want them to take that equation and complete the table of values, and then use those ordered pairs in order to plot those points on the graph. So if you take a look here, this is going to be the sheet where they work on their own scenario, and from here they'll create a poster with their group. This has all the same information as the putt-putt problem did. However, on this one, each group will have their own scenario instead of everyone working on the same one. One thing I like about this lesson is that it lends itself to differentiation within the classroom, because everyone will be working on the same template and filling in the same information. However, you can tell just from these two examples that you could give one group maybe one that's more difficult. This one has the decimals in it, and then this one might be a more simple problem if you wanted to differentiate that way. But once again, everyone's doing the same, so no one notices that, oh, your problem's easier than mine or whatever, or you're not doing the same work that I'm doing. Hope you enjoy this lesson.